Hey kids, welcome back to On Stage, Off Stage. I'm your host, George Sapio, and this is episode number 127, March 2020. Our guest this month is Vivian Lermond. Vivian is a playwright, an actor, a producing artistic director, and a teacher. She also evaluates script pitches and screenplay submissions for Gallagher Literary, a Los Angeles talent management company, and is also a script analysis specialist for stage plays at afilmwriter.com. And as I mentioned, she has taught playwriting at Columbus State Community College, and because I'm always interested to hear how people teach playwriting, that's what I figured we'd start with.
Okay, one of the things that I'd really kicked in when I was researching you was that you're a teacher and you taught playwriting. I believe it was Columbus State Community College, if I have that correct.
Correct.
I've done stage directing courses myself, and I love working with community college kids. So,
yes.
As a teacher, as a playwriting teacher, what do you focus on in your course? I mean, what's important for you to get across to these kids above everything else? And what kind of work are they turning in? I'd be very interested to know what exactly these kids feel important enough to write about.
Okay, well, in our situation at Columbus State, we, of course, didn't have an associate's degree in theater, but we definitely had students that wanted to go on perhaps and transfer to, say, Ohio State University or Otterbein if they're musically inclined. So basically the idea is that an actor can really benefit from understanding what goes into the crafting of a play. And certainly a playwright is reversed, can understand much better how to write a good one if they've been an actor. So,
one would hope so, yeah.
Yes. But so most of my students were involved in taking the acting courses and then took the playwriting course as an elective. From time to time, you'd have a student that just thought, oh, well, this is going to be a piece of cake, and then, of course, they found out that that wasn't going to be the case.
Yeah, that's a cruel wake-up. I had one actor tell me, why don't you just churn this stuff out?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, and so, but one of the focal points for all of my work in terms of learning how to craft a play is to have to write them, and in some cases in a collaborative process with other students in your group, since theater is collaboration, or should be.
It is.
And so we would always do, for example, a 5-minute play. So my focus of my course was all on the writing and the thinking versus let me find a textbook. So, I saved the students money, and we got down to the nitty-gritty pretty quickly. So the 5-minute play was definitely on there, and learning how to write a monologue, because that's a story in and of itself, and it has a beginning, middle, and an end. And they did very well, and then what we would do at the end of the term was work with the instructor who taught the acting classes and then have the acting students perform the playwright students' work. So it was a nice little montage of working with talent. And it was rather surprising to see how creative people could be. Now, sometimes if you had someone who wasn't an acting student, I remember one time we have a program in Ohio called the Golden Seniors, and they can enroll with over 62 in any class for free. So I remember one time I did have a woman who was in her 60s, and that was challenging for her group because these are all students that are 18 to 25, perhaps.
Bit of an age difference there.
And yes, so, but I told them, I said, you're really gifted because you're having a different perspective, and that's what collaboration is about. It's not a solo act here. You're writing this together. So it was fun. It was a challenge at times because not all students, as we both know, are driven to, excel. They just want to take something and get by.
And not all playwrights are bent towards collaboration either.
No, and because our profession is rather solo, but we have to understand that at least in those early stages, it's really good to banter around. And I'm sure you work with other playwrights that come up with an idea, and you say, "Well, have you thought about this?" Or,
yeah, sure, yeah.
And so they have to learn that that's important because we all know when from the page to stage situation takes place, then we come into a whole different conglomeration of individuals who see their theatrical focus as a solo opportunity versus a teamwork situation.
Mm-hmm. So, what are these kids writing about? I mean, what kind of issues and topics are these kids coming back with when they do their writing? Because if they're gonna write about something, it's got to be important.
I tell them that I would prefer they write comedy. I just thought that comedy would be easier for them, and so we would try to do. We'd start out with, and I've done a lot of writing workshops. I have one, in fact, coming up. The art of writing the short form play, but teaching them structure and how meaningful dialogue is, and what I call the naming ceremony. What are your characters' names, and what do those names say about them? I mean, somebody named Devlin is probably not going to be a cowboy.
Well,
you think of the name Rusty, and you think of someone rustic. So
true.
So we, go through those parameters and have a little worksheet, that they can kind of get their ideas together.
Yeah. What about in your own work? Is it tricky for you to come up with names for your own characters?
No, they sort of float around in my head, and again, a lot of it has to do with their ethnic background. I'm really a writer who enjoys writing dialect, so those are things that I consider. So if the play is set in the South and you have Southerners, then the naming should be characters that kind of connote a Southerner. And
like Beauregard or something. Yeah.
Beauregard.
Beauregard.
So, Beauregard. And so that is kind of where I take that. So for my own work, and it's interesting, I go through stages, but I really like writing dialects. I think it's very challenging for actors, and one of the shortcomings of that is I've submitted works to different theaters, and they've written back and said, "Oh, we really love the play, but nobody showed up for auditions that could possibly do this dialect." So you run in, So you run into those challenges, but I like, because I was raised in New York State and my parents were born and raised in New York City, I really like working with that East Coast dialect and Southern dialects and Irish dialects and language syntax, which is huge because as American writers, we write a particular way and we don't consider the phraseology of other dialects, English dialects.
I mean, there are dialects that are highly, you can't understand them if you come from a different dialect. And the East Coast runs everything from the Gorton's Fishermen to These, Dat, and Does in Brooklyn.
Right. And, it reminds me actually of, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, but he had two female actors on. One did the Brooklyn girls from Saturday Night Live skits, and the other was J-Lo, and she was from the Bronx, and they were trying to explain the difference in their dialects. It was really hilarious. It was fun. But, yeah, so it's just understanding that and doing some research. And if you have an acting background, talking it out to see the rhythm, because to me, there definitely is rhythm in language and in the way characters present themselves. And it's important that
Sure it is, yeah.
they come across that way, because that's how we come to that whole willing suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's a subliminal thing. When you hear somebody speak in normal day-to-day life, you can tell when they're trying to impress you. You can tell when they're using dialect or words that are not typical for them. And when you see somebody on stage who's misspeaking or overspeaking or speaking in a way that is clumsy, you can tell that the playwright has tried too hard to make this person a certain character instead of listening to what they're saying.
Agreed.
Yeah.
That is very true. And I think this is particularly true if somebody gets their hand on a script from the UK, and they, especially in community theater, that they're going to try and do some sort of Cockney accent.
Yeah, been there.
So, and it's like, no, that's not who they are. That's So basically, I think that's where the playwright comes in and says to the director, look, I'd like a Northern English dialect, or, I'd like a South London, or go to the library, in other words, and find yourself some dialect tapes.
Like a Geordie or a Yorkshire or something like that.
Yes. And so, and you get into that, too, with Irish dialects. And I said, the way a story is written, the dialogue is written, should tell you how much emphasis you should be putting on the words, and go from there.
Right.
So that can be very challenging for some groups, but to me it just adds texture and dimension to characters, because we all talk like where we came from pretty much.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
still
identifying.
Do.
Yeah, well, and I do too. So, and one of the things, I also taught public speaking for many years at the college, and I would tell them, you could tell the difference between General American, which is what they speak in the Midwest,
right,
and at the East Coast by the way they say three words.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I would spell the word, and they'd pronounce Mary, Mary, Mary. And I said, no, if you're from the East Coast, it's Mary, Mary, and Mary.
Yeah.
So it's just those little nuances that, as a writer, we hope the actors will create.
So as a playwright,
but
I mean, as a playwright, when you're writing dialectical dialogue, okay, do you write it out in standard American English, or do you write it out phonetically in some cases? In a sense, telling the actor how to say it.
I always write it out in standard English because, for example, if we are coming from being raised on the East Coast, we would say to somebody, "Where are you going?" Or, "Where are you?" And in the Midwest and the South, they say, "Where are you at?"
Yeah.
So it's those subtleties that I think can give the hint. Again, we go to the rhythm. And so, and I think it's true when you look at Brooklyn or the Bronx, they tend to add in prepositions. So, in other words, they'll say, there's a line in a play of mine that's set in Brooklyn, and it's the husband always dresses up as Dracula for Halloween, and so the wife says, "Would you stop with the Dracula? It's always you and the Dracula."
Yeah.
So that's
sounds like my old neighborhood. Yeah.
Right. So it's not that emphasis. Just the words alone should give them the rhythm of where we're going with that. Because they never say that in the Midwest. They'd say, "Why do you always dress up like Dracula?" Period.
Yeah.
Question mark. So,
we were a lot more expressive where I grew up. You know, it's we always ended up throwing 6 or 7 more sentences in what we were saying anyway because that's what we were doing. You know.
I know. So I think it's a gift to give that experience as a writer to people that live everywhere, and I have a lot of my work done in the UK, and the actors say, "Oh, I just love working on this. I love working on this American dialogue," because over there they'll say like, "Whilst you were sleeping," as opposed to while. So it's little subtle things like that are, you could tell. You don't want to be able to tell where the writer's from.
Right.
So,
telltale genuine notes of the character. So
right.
In addition to writing your own work, you also evaluate other people's work.
Yes.
Yeah, and I noticed that you worked for a talent management company where you do screenplays and pitches and such like that. And you've also worked with afilmwriter.com where you're a script analysis specialist. How did you fall into this?
Correct. Well, it was kind of interesting. I just one day decided, as I tend to do, that I wanted to try my hand at writing screenplays because you know how it is with the stage, especially the modern-day stage and modern-day budget capabilities, is that you're not going to have big scene changes in a black box theater. So everything is basically a single-unit set. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to be able to just every 5 minutes have them somewhere else?
Sure, yeah.
So that kind of inspired me to try my hand on it. And I was looking for places I could potentially send my work to, and that's how I got on to the lit management company, and I noticed that they were calling for readers. And I thought, boy, there's no better way to help focus on your own structure and getting it right than to read somebody else's. And they had a very, in Hollywood, they have a very, very strict guidelines in terms of when things happen. It's very formulaic. And
sure, we're talking like the Sid Fields kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just applied, and they sent me a sample script to analyze with the script analysis format that they use, and so I just started to do it, and it helped my writing tremendously. And one of the vice president at the time of the company asked me if I also wanted to read for her, but she was particularly interested in expanding her scope to stage plays, and so that's how I edged into that. But it's just been a wonderful tool to make me double-check my own work based on having those experiences. But it's also very challenging to try to explain to writers who are not submitting work that's going to get a recommend or even a consider, and that don't understand structure or plot points or any of those things. But it's really the same structure that we use, if we want to go back to Aristotle. I mean, it's the same structure, but it's elongated because they're longer works usually. I mean, a regular, comedy is about 90 pages on the screen, or a drama can go up to 120, but after that, nobody wants to read it. So it's just too long for today's market.
Well, yeah, that's another topic.
Yes. So people's ability to, focus mentally.
Yeah.
So all of those things, I think, have been a real gift to me because they've taught me to evaluate my own work closer. And that's important because I think we have two kinds of people, George. I think we have the writer that thinks everything they write is terrible and they refuse to send it out anywhere to get a judgment on it.
That's me on Wednesdays and Fridays, yes.
Oh, okay. And then you have the people that think they're terrific and they should have their work go up on Broadway tomorrow. And they're the ones that you have to be rather delicate with. And one of the things that's really awkward, and I refrain from doing it most times, if someone who is a writer comes to you and says, "I really like you to read this and tell me what you think."
Oh, boy.
Yes. Oh.
Do you really want me to read this and really tell you what I think?
Well, and I try to be extremely diplomatic if it's not good, but I usually say, well, these are the 10 things I always ask myself. This is my list of 10 that is my checklist. I'm sending it to you. You go through your script and see if you, before you ever send it to me, have accomplished these things. So that's sort of how it works, and sometimes it's nice to have someone. I don't normally send my scripts to people to check them out. I figure if it's good and I submit it places and it gets done, there's my answer.
Right.
And if nobody wants to do it, you think, boy, I better take a look at this. This is fun.
Hey kids, thanks for tuning in to Onstage, Offstage. I'm your host, George Sapio, and this is episode number 127, March 2020. Our guest is Vivian Lermond, a playwright, actor, producing artistic director, and teacher. Right now we're getting into that oh-so-subjective subject of talking to playwrights about how good their play is. We all know it's easy when you think the play is worthy, but how do you give feedback when you're not so sure the work you're responding to is, in your own estimation, of course, maybe less than stellar?
Well, I've always found it's a crapshoot when you come to sending things out, and I think, irregardless of how good or bad it is, because there's a lot of really bad plays out there, in my estimation. Okay,
I agree.
That other people just love ridiculously. So I don't know. I know what that means, but I mean, as someone who's written a book on workshopping and collaboration and putting your script up for development and comment, I've always found it to be, at least in my case, and I say this only for me because there are playwrights out there who are amazingly successful who don't do this. But I just love to get the feedback before I throw this thing on stage, because I can't run around talking to everybody in the audience in Winnipesaukee to find out what was good, what was bad, where did I lose them, this, that, and the other thing.
Well, I agree that we need to do that, and one of the big problems, and I think this is much more the case with full-length works.
Sure, yeah.
That you want, my whole thing is, why don't you first of all have a table read, and then you'll get a sense of what's not working from the actors, and then go back and make whatever changes, or if you have some great brainstorm that something you want to add, then that would be the point to do it. Then once you do that, then you can have a staged reading and get feedback from a different group of actors and an audience.
Sure, yeah.
That's going to be honest. And then you could try, after you've done all that and feel, okay, I think I've addressed the issues that did not appear to be working for me, and I think I'm ready to send this out now. And then send it out. Yeah. But a lot of it has to do with personality. I think, whoever the AD is reading it. Yeah. I always, and I'm sure you do too, go out to their website if they have one. and get some information, look at the pictures. I mean, if everybody in their ensemble is in their 20s and this is a script that calls for actors over 40, well, that's not going to work. I mean,
Right.
it could be great, but it's not great for them. And so many times our fellow playwrights will feel so horribly rejected and go through this whole rejection mode of depression. It's not that their work was bad, as you say. It just wasn't right for that group.
Yeah, or it wasn't the right day. I mean, I've been on the
or the right reader.
Exactly.
And that's another whole thing that we could probably get into and talk for like miles and miles. But the whole thing of where are the readers coming from?
Right.
If they're volunteers at a community theater, for example, they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know, like, how are these words going to transcend? Where's the subtext for the actors to play with? Because by and large, we really do write for actors.
Yes, we do.
You know, and so if an actor reads it and says, I love this play, I have to do this play, I need to be in this play, then you think, I did my job.
Mm-hmm.
But so many actors or so many writers don't have a sensibility about acting. They write.
Right.
And so then what happens is the dialogue becomes cumbersome. People don't talk in paragraphs. This is one of my big things that I always tell people. You know, they send you a script and each person talks for 5 minutes and then responds. I mean, we don't talk like that to each other.
No, we don't. We interrupt each other like crazy.
Well, exactly. Or we grunt a response, or, you know. So,
I mean, I find it's always great for playwrights to have that kind of previous experience, to have acted for a while or to have other theater experience, because you can't just write in a vacuum. It's exactly like you're saying. You can't write according to some idea of something in your head that has no experiential past. You have to know what it's like to be on stage, to do a monologue, to interact with other people. I mean, doing Mammoth is a perfect example.
Oh, yes. And you know, the other giant monologue writer, Alan Bennett in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically one-person shows, but a great storyteller. And so understanding what makes a great story, and I do like writing monologues, and I've been writing a lot of them, but this is something that I'm thinking, well, if I was an actor, would this 2-minute monologue make it for me? Does it give me enough meat to tell a story and deliver the emotion behind it?
Yeah.
Because that's what an actor wants.
Sure.
So we go back to that. We go back to, okay, what can I give an actor? That's what, not like, well, this is a brilliant piece of literature. and then in that case, then write a novel.
Well, it's two different things. It could be a brilliant piece of literature, but it's not something you want to see performed on a stage.
Right. And an actor, if they're having a hard time, and this is something an actor told me recently, she said, I love your work because it makes it's easy to memorize because it's natural.
Yeah.
And so we're not about, people aren't about well-structured sentences when they're talking. They're talking. And I would tell acting students when they would struggle, and you'd see like they're delivering these lines like they're some sort of robot.
Yeah.
No. You should. The audience should feel like you're hunting for the next word, like you're looking for it in your head. They're like, oh, well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all of that, and of course, creatives of all dimensions and sizes and ability. And so when you put that all together and then put people in a theater, it's always challenging, I think, for a director to take this crew of people at varying levels of experience, if we're talking...
Oh, sure, community theater right there.
And have them put on an even performance. And for the playwright, it's the same thing. It's like, oh boy, those two are great. Ooh, the other one, wow, that's not working so well. And
that happens.
And so, these are war stories. I'm sure that if we got a room full of theater people together, we'd have a heyday. We'd have to book a hotel for a week.
Only a week, really? That's optimistic. Let's piggyback off of this onto something we were talking about community theater there a little bit, and community theater companies they're tricky things to deal with, to create, to manage successfully for a period of time. And I notice you've written about business sense, theater management, and in particular, you chalk it up to a right brain, left brain imbalance. Can you expound on this for a couple of minutes?
Oh, sure. I call it TFC, theater fiscal cognizance, because theaters have to have a right brain, left brain balance, because theater is a business.
Yeah.
And to be successful, you need to generate off-stage money to make on-stage magic.
Sure.
And this is where theaters really fall short. We all know the artistic director's focus is on the creative side of the theater landscape, but really what a theater company, especially a startup theater company, should be focused on is a producing director. It doesn't have to be their exact title, but basically someone who oversees realistic production budgets and those basically mundane, non-theatrical tasks called operating expenses.
Yes, I've heard of those. They make lights go on and things like that.
Yes. And overseeing the grant writing, soliciting private donors, fundraising, establishing fundraising initiatives.
Yeah.
And the other part that is very poor from all my experience with boards is working to build a board of directors from the business community who can bring their right brain business cognizance to the board table.
How does one do that? How does one build a successful board?
Well, okay. So
to
from my experience of being on boards that are not successful, unfortunately, there needs to be kind of policy changes which won't please everybody. Because unfortunately, a lot of people sign up on a board for two basic reasons. One, they see themselves as a creative, like an actor or director or a playwright, getting some sort of inroad into that theater company for personal gain. And the second reason they may do it is they are a business person, but they just want something community service on the resume.
Right.
So these to me are the two big issues. But one of the things, and I suggested this to a theater company quite recently who is in a startup phase, and everybody on the board is an actor, and they don't have any business experience. So they're picking plays based on which ones they want to be in.
Sure.
Versus what the community would want. And they've just, rented space for $2,500 a month and signed a 3-year contract. And I don't know how that's going to happen with a 55-seat theater.
$73 a ticket. Right.
Well, they charge $20, but it's not like you're going to be packing the house. And so that to me basically is how do you build a board? Well, you need to do it delicately, and you need to set term limits. Just tell them, okay, you're going to serve for 2 years and bring your best to the table, and whatever professional skills or specific skills that you have, we'd like to look at those. So we have a balanced board of talent. And so, maybe you'd like to have a lawyer on the board, or a CPA, or an accountant, or
somebody who can do all the things I have no idea how to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the whole artisan element of theater is always really strong. But the reality of theater, which is the financial end of things, and that's the other thing. Even a community theater, I think if a person wants to serve in the capacity of a board member, that there should be some sort of buy-in that says this is a commitment for me. It doesn't have to be, $5,000. Most boards that I'm aware of, it's at least about $1,000, some $250. But it says, look, if you're not interested in putting up $250, I don't know how strong is the commitment.
Sure.
And they could do that $250 could be service. They could be a major marketing person in town who's going to take on the marketing for you. But, but it takes gumption, George, to tell a board that's been sitting there doing nothing for years on end, but, they're a co-founder or their grandmother is. But just to say, look, you served your time, you did it well, and we need to expand our board and have at least 10 people on here, and 7 of those people should have a business background and have nothing to do with theater.
That's hard to put together.
It is, but
that might take that might take months to put together.
Well, even if it took a year, I told theater people, if you're thinking about starting a theater company, you don't start with an artistic director. You start with the producing director. You go around, you talk to people, you go in with a business plan and a setup budget, expectations of seasons. You put together a plan and you work the plan.
Sure.
You just don't say, you want to be on the board?
No, you have to walk up to people with something in hand. I mean, if they're going to be on a board for a theater community that you're putting together, you have to show them that you've done your homework. You have to show them that there is something already there for them to consider worthy enough to lend their time, their effort, their talents, and their money.
Yes, and their money.
And their money.
And, and this is a firsthand experience. I had mentioned to you, I believe, that I spearheaded a theater group here in town called the Irish Theater Project.
Right, which I'm going to get to next. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I saw a need in this women's organization I belonged to at the time that we needed to establish a college scholarship for scholastic excellence for the women in our group and or their daughters. And there was, certain criteria and this and that. And they said, well, what would it give them, like $500 a year? I said, well, that wouldn't even buy the textbooks for a semester.
Yeah.
No, we're going to give them $25. Well, how are we going to do that? So, I went to the board and I presented everything and how I was going to do it. And the startup money was going to be $6,000 because I believe, even in a community theater environment, in paying people.
Sure, absolutely. Yes.
Give them gas money or something.
Exactly, yes.
And then I also wanted to hire an equity director who was fabulous, and I trusted her, and she knew what she was doing. And so everyone on the board just looked so startled, and the president at the time said, if Vivian says she can raise $6,000, she will raise $6,000. So, of course, I did. And we did 6 shows a year for 5 years. And I set 99-seat equity theater because I had that equity actor.
Right.
And that was the lowest, scale. So we did that. And so our profit after all expenses and paying everybody for those 30 performances was $65,000. Each show cost about $5,000. But I also wrote grants and did all that, so I got everything covered. But the profit we made to put in the bank for the scholarship over that 5 years was $65,000. And so the thing of it is, I had to wear all these hats, as the producing director, the marketer, the this and that. And I had someone who was an equity former artistic director here in Columbus ask me to have lunch. And he came every year for 5 years. He always came to the last show, the Sunday matinee, and I sold out every show. Every show, all 30 shows were sold out. And so he said, I want to know, how do you do that? Because every time it's standing room only. And
Sure.
I said, well, I call people. He said, on the phone? Like, I said, well, that's the only way I know how to do it. I don't have like aluminum hats I wear to contact the aliens. I don't know. So he was just very intrigued by the fact that I would do that. And I said, well, people like to be invited. And in this day and age, of course, everything's event invites, which are fine, but nobody does any follow-up. They just put them out there. And to this day, if I still want to do something, I call those people. I get them on the phone.
It's always more work than anybody believes to make it look like it took no work at all.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah.
But if you want it done right, you have to give the 110%.
Sure.
You can't give 50 and think that people are magically going to show up and take seats in the theater.
No, because that's not what happens. So what kind of work did the Irish Theatre Project produce?
Well, what we did was people would submit from Columbus, and they had to be short plays, like 20 minutes or less, and about an Irish theme. And it couldn't be, the leprechauns are coming. I mean, it would have to be something substantial. They would have had to have done their research and so on.
Right.
So over the years, I had a couple in each time and other people, but it gave writers in Columbus an opportunity to have a vehicle for their work to get done that they could see. And it was good because we were an Irish-American organization, so we were, catering to the crowd, so to speak. So it gave a lot of people opportunity, and it certainly, the end result was there was a lot of girls over the years that are still getting those scholarships because of what was done. Short plays were good because people would say, oh, I really like that. I did one play, it was called High Tea, and it was all mimed, the whole thing. It was 3 women in their 70s in a pub, and it was all set to music. So all of their antics and everything were set to music. There was one man that came to all 6 shows just to see that one.
Wow, nice.
And he laughed as hard the last time as he did the first time. It was like he was seeing it again for the first time, But I think that's the thing. I mean, you have to, know your audience. And in that particular case, it was definitely, the Irish community in Columbus, which is a pretty large community. And so it all worked.
Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely wonderful to make something last like that and to be so productive and to have such good response from the community. It's what everybody dreams about.
Well, and, it's there, but again, we go back to that theater fiscal cognizance. You have to have a plan, know exactly what everything's going to cost, not go over budget, get things volunteered.
It's a business.
And all of those kinds. It is.
It's a business.
And that's where so many. It's almost as if for theater majors they should include a course
Yes.
Not taught by an academic, but taught by someone that's gone through the school of hard knocks and and truly understand what theaters need to work. They should have a course in it.
A few universities do. I have seen theater management on several of the course listings for theater colleges, theater universities, and
well, that's terrific.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely critical. I mean, to understand how this thing works, you have to understand. You have to know how.
Right, and I think a lot of acting students that are that focused on that creative side of theater probably won't sign up for the course because they think, well, I'm not ever going to be doing that. And then 15 years from now, they find themselves like, oh boy, I should have taken that course.
Make it a requirement. Make it a requirement.
It should be.
Absolutely.
I would agree. That would be something that we really need to see.
Sure, theater is a business. Vivian Lermond, this has been absolutely wonderful chatting with you, and thank you so much
too, George,
for taking the time to be here. This is great.
Well, I've really enjoyed it, and the time has certainly flown by.
Yes, it has. It always does with good conversation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey kids, thanks for listening to Onstage Offstage. Onstage Offstage is produced monthly, and all of our shows can be found at onstageoffstage.org and also on iTunes. If you enjoy what we do, please recommend us to your friends. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at OnOffStage. And if you are a theater artist with an upcoming project of interest or work in a part of theater we haven't covered yet or know of someone in the theater world who'd make some great chat, please send us a note at info@onstageoffstage.org. Onstage Offstage believes in and advocates for a world where all people are free to live their lives as they wish, in peace and without fear. We believe in universal respect, diversity, and equality in all areas of life for all people, no matter what their nationality, race, religion, age, sexual status, or gender. Onstage Offstage will never promote or endorse those who seek to diminish others because of who they are. I'm George Sapio. Thank you once again, and happy theatering to all of you.